Recently, the Department of Probation, the same entity that is driving reincarceration, is now in charge of pretrial supervision, pretrial services, pretrial risk assessing, pretrial processes that oftentimes lead to more folks being incarcerated, specifically Black and brown folks up and down the state. My name is Mark Anthony Clayton Johnson. I'm the executive director and part of the founding team of Dignity and Power Now. I've been doing abolition and decarceration work in California for almost the last 20 years.
I'm from Los Angeles, California. I was born and raised here. I'm currently a bail disruptor and a client advocate at the Bail Project. I have experienced probation and pretrial detention from juvenile hall, starting with juvenile hall when I was 16 years old. At the time, I was a teen mom. My son was 6 months old. During that time, I was on probation for 2 years until I became an adult, or what they considered an adult, at 18. And during that time, I did an ankle monitor for 6 months as well. When I was around 20, I had another run-in with the police where I started, where I had relapsed and I started doing drugs again. So just for possession and stuff like that. So then I had probation, but I never really went and never really followed through with it. There wasn't really any support. By the time I was 25, I had went to county jail for the final time and was ultimately sentenced to prison, where once released, I was put on AB 109 probation, which is a form of parole, and probation is a mixture of the two. Put on an ankle monitor for 3 months, and then given a probation officer after that time.
Longest I've ever been incarcerated pre-trial would be this last time, and I believe it was 5 months.
Growing up, I grew up with a single mom in a 2-bedroom apartment with 2 brothers, a brother and a sister. She worked all the time, so I was at a babysitter's house, and not really at home. From July 6, 2021 to recently, June 23rd was when I just got off of pretrial. Was the longest I've been on pretrial for almost a year.
Hello, this is a prepaid collect call from an incarcerated individual at Sacramento County Rio Cosumnes Correctional Center. Securus, you may start the conversation now.
My name is Rafael. I'm from the Mexica people. I got booked in on an arson charge, and there was hardly any evidence at all that I was to blame for this arson. And I thought I was going to be released. I was pretty confident, but when I went to my first court date, they tried to get me a felony for malicious arson, and I was facing 6 years with a strike. I went from thinking I was going home that Thursday to possibly doing 12 years in prison. I had to just work with the public defender. I had to accept 90 days of my life here in this county jail, even though I'm not responsible for this crime.
The reality is that jails are inhumane and they profit off of families. And because jail is supposed to be a short-term condition, the conditions are often dire. In fact, what we know is that a large amount of people who die in custody die pre-trial.
Jail is trash. Even people there that they're like, I would rather go to prison, which I never understood, but long story short, in jail, if you don't have money, if you don't have drugs, if you're not, helping out, if you guys, what I mean? Like, if you're not doing something, you're fucked.
If you can't afford the store, you may not eat because the food in there is just so inhumane. You're locked inside for let's say 22 hours of the day. You don't get any sunshine. The visiting is horrible. They cancel visits at will. I can only imagine how it's been since COVID.
Food there, it's all soy, and it's disgusting. It's, you know, you grab that shit, you're just almost like, what the fuck? I'm a grown ass man. You give me, I'd feed my daughter twice as much applesauce. You know, even then, like, why are you feeding a grown man applesauce? You know, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, they're built in there. I'm saying, like, so anyways, like, yeah, like, if you don't have money, and especially now, like, it just all went up. So with phone calls, like, it's all money. You get a free, like, maybe 5-minute courtesy call, if that, and that's the one-time thing. So, you know, that's like, if that's you're calling your wife and she's mad and she hangs up, it's a wrap. You know, you're done. Like, hey, I don't got no money. So you're over there trying to hustle for a little bit of phone time or whatever it is. So phone calls are expensive, food's expensive, hygiene's expensive.
They're really small portions. They're like almost the size of a cafeteria, elementary cafeteria lunch, you know, and not as good in quality. And I've worked in the kitchen before, so like you'll see the ham or the bologna that we slice up for the lunches. They'll be frozen in the freezer. It's like it's the length of like two loaves of bread, and about that thick too. And you slice it up, boom, 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 boom. But like as you're ripping off the plastic, it'll say, you know, good through 2019. That's what we feed the inmates. It'll be some outdated food. And like when it thaws out, when the bologna thaws out, it'll have like a greenish tint to it, like a little sheen color, like it just looks spoiled. It looks like spoiled meat. But you're so hungry that you eat it. You scarf it down and you eat your soup and you just, you know, soldier up through it. You're thankful for the meal.
So in California, what we know is that the Department of Probation is the entity that is involved and controls community supervision, right? This is the entity that once you are released from a jail, they're the ones you have to check in with, you have to follow up on appointments with, they're drug testing you, they're showing up at your house, your work, and the Department of Probation is one of the biggest drivers of incarceration across the state.
In the last 3 years, I've gotten like 4 violations, and it was because I was homeless, you know, really, and I didn't have a phone to call my probation officer. Where I have to meet with my probation officer is like 6 miles away from the encampment that I was living at. And if somebody's not there to watch my stuff in the tent that I was living at, all my stuff would get stolen. So I would wait for, like, you know, one of my neighbors that I trust to be there so I could go walk 6 miles to visit my probation officer. And if she was gone, there was no way for me to call her. So I missed a few meetings, which resulted in probation violations, which are 90 days for missing a meeting.
Previous to the probation officer, like after I was released from prison, I never had a probation officer who I felt was, how do I put this, supportive. You know, a lot of times I was placed with males who, you know, felt like the guys who they had on their caseload was a lot more trouble, and so they really didn't need to help me figure anything out. Or if I had females I was on a female's caseload, it was more like, oh, well, I have to show you that I'm big and bad and I can lock you back up. And it's like, I know you can lock me back up. How do I stay out?
I've dealt with probation here in Santa Barbara and in Oxnard, because I did move to Oxnard for a little bit when my daughter was born. And so some of them are cool, some of them are just kind of like, you know what I mean, iffy. But as far as like my own personal probation officers I've dealt with, I mean, I've had, I guess I could say I've had more lenient, more understandable ones in Oxnard instead of in Oxnard County or Ventura County, because out here in Santa Barbara they're a lot more strict on, you know, they always assume the worst and just full on like little raid without getting raided, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, hey bro, I'm in my slides, bro, chill, you know?
Every time that I've had an encounter with incarceration system when it comes to pretrial detention. I've never felt like I've been presumed innocent. I've never felt like there was any opportunity to prove innocence. It's always been either take this deal or we're going to take you to the box and this is the maximum you're facing. So it was always a scare tactic. You're going to be here for months. You're going to get the maximum sentence if you fight this and lose. And there was never any encouragement to say, hey, I think you can handle this. Hey, I think that you might have a shot to get a lesser charge, you know, so.
If you're homeless and you don't have any money, you totally get overlooked by everyone, even sometimes the public defender. Sometimes they'll just say, well, you're gonna lose. You're gonna lose. You have to take this. You better take this, or you're foolish if you don't take this. I have to plead no contest, which is basically pleading guilty, And I lost a lot of cases like that and had to do 90 days, 60 days, 30 days. And, this is because I didn't have any money for legal representation.
It's not like a private attorney, so it's not like I'm on their time, and sometimes they don't even have time, and it's very hard to get in contact, at least with the ones that I was dealing with. So it made it a lot, it just brought a lot of stress and anxiety, knowing hey, why can't you talk to me, let me know something, what's going on, and I wouldn't hear nothing back, so it was pretty rough. Last year I've had to deal with 3, and this very last one was the only one that I've actually felt damn, you know what I mean? She's like, nah, we're not. Hold up, you've done this, you've done that, you done that. Let's work it out. Let's do this. And I don't know. Sometimes I feel like it's the way I look. I fucked up, I guess, by tightening my neck in certain aspects, because they're kind of oh, well, look at this for you. How far can I get you in court, man? Let's see what we can do. Let's just sign. Let's go through. You know what I mean? And instead of nah, let's see what we can do. Let's use what you've done and let's try to get you what you I think deserve or something. It's I'm not asking for a slap on the wrist. I'm over here putting in some positive work to try to change and reinforce my life. So it's just
There was no ever any explanation of some alternatives to incarceration that I might be able to obtain. It was 5 minutes before you go in to see the judge. You get time waived, whatever. After 3 months and you haven't had any progress with your case, anybody would want to get out. So it's they're like, hey, we got this deal for you. How does this deal sound? And I'm like, okay, well, you mean I can go home today? Sure, why not? I don't care anymore. Just let me out of here.
So the reality about incarceration is that even being incarcerated for a short period of time, and every time someone is incarcerated, they have to start over. Within hours, within days of being incarcerated, you can lose your house, your job, your kids, relationships to your family. And so it is tremendously disruptive.
Every single time I go to jail, I have to start all over, because if I'm at the store or if I'm on the street and I get pulled over and arrested, nobody's going to take care of my stuff, no one's going to take care of my stuff while I'm in jail for 2-3 months. It all gets ransacked, it all gets stolen, and I have to start from square one every time I get out of jail, just like I'm about to right now. I lost my truck. I put over $20,000 into my truck, and then I had no vehicle. I used my truck for work too. I'm on foot, catching buses and trying to, it just really, really set my life back. It slowed me down. No way to go pick up my children or go visit them. It really messed with my mental health. I get really depressed. I feel like I can't help my children, and it ultimately led to me being suicidal.
Every experience with the incarceration system pre-trial basically set me back to square one in terms of being homeless. During pre-trial detention, I have lost my belongings over and over again while I was experiencing homelessness. So every time I'd catch a case and I'd maybe be gone 2 weeks, whatever house I was staying at, even if it was a friend, oftentimes they let someone else who needed to stay there, and they take my stuff, or, they just got tired of looking at my stuff, so they get rid of it. And without the support of like my family members and stuff like that, like I wouldn't have been able to hold on to anything at all. I've had cars impounded, when I've scraped up to get the money for the car, or just, like someone probably like gave me a car out of the goodness of their heart, and then, not making sure that my license was renewed. Or one time I have a license, but I didn't have a physical license on me, so they impounded my car. Right? But I was living out of the car, and you could tell I was living out of the car, and they didn't care, So it's just all type of stuff. I've lost my son's Christmas gifts, all type of stuff. One of my earliest encounter with the incarceration system was as a juvenile, and at the time my son was 6 months. So as you know, 6 months is some of the most prominent time in a child's life, when it comes to their early development. So not being able to breastfeed my son when that was the plan, and that's what I've been doing up until that point. Not being able to see him unless it was the weekends, missing his first, like him crawling or him walking, or and seeing him like when he comes on the weekends, like where he's come thus far, but not being there for those first moments was very challenging.
On December 24th, while in isolation, 24-hour lockdown, a guard came up to me and he said, you wear blue, I wear green. You're an inmate, I'm a guard. But at a moment like this, you're just a man and I'm just a man. He said, Ortiz, I regret to inform you that your father has passed away. My dad was my best friend. And my dad's a legend. He's a legend. There's murals of him all over Sacramento. He's a very well-known leader in Sacramento, Jesse Corvera Ortiz. I'm very proud of my father and his accomplishments. And it was really, really, really hard that, thousands of people attended his funeral, and I was locked up in reception, not even able to place a phone call.
Later on in my incarceration experiences, my family had basically not given up on me, but they just felt like it was best that they take full custody of my son. And even during my time in prison, where I started getting my life together and realizing where I needed to make a change, there was court proceedings that happened with that I wasn't allowed to attend, or I wasn't transported to, and ultimately it has residual effects now. So even though I do have a great relationship with my son now, it's still how do I say this? It's more of a co-parenting thing, informal, instead of, the whole shebang with rights and stuff like that. So it's disheartening to think about that, but
with all my family members, they offered $20,000 to the CDC to have two guards drive me to the funeral, paying for their time and all that, and transportation, but they wouldn't go for it. They didn't. So I missed the funeral ceremony. My father doesn't have a gravesite, so the only place I can visit my dad and mourn is a mural on Freeport and Meadowview Street in Sacramento, on the corner. And I go to that mural and I visit my dad, and I just look at him, I kiss him, and sometimes I sit there until I just fall asleep.
We know that incarceration does not address the core needs of our communities, and that the root causes of incarceration are certainly not addressed by pretrial. People need mental health support. They need physical health support. They need housing stability. They need access to meaningful work. These are the things that our communities need, not pretrial detention.
Getting help with housing, really a lot of the problems stemmed from me living in a homeless camp. I went to the Salvation Army, I went to Francis House, I went to a lot of places that are supposed to help homeless people. And, you could do a job resume there, you can do stuff like that, but they were all full, all of them full.
Some resources I did not receive early on that I feel like me and my family could have benefited from would be linkage to housing assistance, linkage to quality substance abuse treatment programs. It was just so many loops to jump through to receive treatment that it's like by the time you got to a phone call or by the time you got to that interview, it was like, I don't even care no more. You know, you really need somebody who's gonna fight for you, and I think that's one of the things that weren't provided on that aspect of probation. I didn't feel like there was anybody fighting for me to stay out. I felt like it was everybody waiting for me to go back or praying that I go back or like ready to lock me back up, you know, and just throw me away.
So if we're asking the question, what do we do instead? We have alternatives. We have models. We have San Francisco pretrial. We have models in Sacramento. We have models that actually look at when someone is arrested and held pretrial, how do we assess what their needs are? How do we assess what their families' needs are, what their communities' needs are, and resource them as a means of getting them out rather than keeping them in?
Some of the barriers that the people I work with who are experiencing pretrial detention face is just finding emergency housing while they're so in limbo about what their next steps will be at the outcome of their next court date. So it's like they want to pursue these services, but because there's so much fog around what their future is gonna look like, it's like they're less likely to engage and kind of just, you know, neglect to go after the resources that are out there for them. But you know what I think, you know what I find helps when I let them know like I've had a history with the incarceration system, they always seem to open up a little bit more. They're always like, okay, well, how'd you get here? Like, what did you do? Like, did this work for you? Like, I haven't tried this personally, but I've heard good things, you know, and just being able to give that, you know, like transparent advice, you know, like I know that it's not an easy road, or I know it's not, you know, exactly what you're looking for, but this can last, you know, and this can help you for this amount of time while you figure things out, you know. They're a little bit more susceptible to that type of, you know, support. Peer support is where it's at. I think that's the answer. We need more formerly incarcerated counselors. We need more formerly incarcerated therapists and addiction studies and like all those type of workers. Like,
it's clear that if we are going to move forward in building healthier and safer communities, then we need to prioritize care, not cages.